Hey guys, Jared with J&J Off-Road. Going to cover the difference in my diff drop versus Superlift's diff drop and why you would choose mine versus a Superlift. Of course, if you buy a Superlift kit, you're not going to need our diff drop. But I'm going to show you why there's a difference in their 2 3/8 drop versus our 1 3/4 drop, and how they're mounted and the problems that you may come with on our diff drops if you decide to go to a higher lift on stock components. Okay, so here we go, guys. Okay, I'm going to start with trying to get a picture of my diff drops installed, which most of you have seen them. It's J&J Off-Road diff drops. I've just got all my skids on, so some of this is going to be hard to get pictures of. There you can see our diff drops. Now our diff drops are 1 3/4, like I said, versus Superlift's 2 3/8. That's my passenger side or right hand side. Those are aluminum, those aren't the steel ones. I'm running aluminum. I don't see if I can get the other side. You can kind of see the back side of it there. And there's a cross member notch. Regardless of what diff drop you have on your vehicle, you will have to notch for that prop shaft. You can see after you drop it, there's just not room for that in there. So now let's cover what's the biggest difference. Why are ours 1 3/4 versus going 2 3/8 like Superlift? Well, the main reason is our diff drops are meant to run on stock components. So if you watch my previous video, I explained to you that Superlift comes with this cross member, drops the lower control arm. We're dropping the lower control arm basically 4 inches. So in doing that, Superlift can get away with dropping 2 3/8 of an inch on their diff drops because this is all out of the way. Like I said, you got to remember, this is my suspension's hanging. I'm on the lift here. So at ground level, my CV angles are almost level. So when this comes up, if I didn't have this drop and tried to bring my diff down 2 3/8 of an inch, what you're going to run into is this CV axle is going to hit your lower control arm. That's where we decided an 1 3/4 on stock suspension, lower control arm mounts, steering knuckles, everything is going to be right at 4 inch. You should have around a 1/2 inch of clearance here. If you look back on our page, you're going to see some photos people have sent in that shows them within the original mounting location and the clearance we have. Now, I know some people have run into trouble. They went up over the 4 inch lift, which is around 23 inches, hub center to fender. So some of them getting up in the 24 inch range, which is getting them up 5 inch lift. What it does is you're pushing the angle up and it's increasing, and you start hitting your CV axle on your lower control arm. So that is why the Superlift can go lower with theirs, because they get their lower control arms out of the way. To where we tried to make a product that people could use if they're wanting to go 4 inches with the old JBA 4 inch lift, which a lot of us ran, and there wasn't any diff drops out there. So we come up with a way that you can drop your diff down and still correct your CV angles pretty much to stock angles and leave your lower control arms. But if you decide to ever go 6 inch, you cannot use our diff drop without incorporating the lower control arm drop, which is this front cross member from Superlift, and their steering knuckle, which I covered in a previous video and showed you, why they raised it, and their tie rods are raised. It shows you all that difference. So I hope you guys kind of followed me on that, the difference in our diff drop versus Superlift. And it's basically, Superlift has their diff drop and it works great with theirs. But if you're wanting to stay with just stock components and say you was going to order Superlift's diff drop, it will not work with stock location control arms because you're going to hit right here with your CV shaft, because it drops that diff down just a little bit. Now, another misconception, people ask, why is it just an 1 3/4 drop when you have a 4-inch lift? It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you were to drop this, if you were to drop the diff down 4 inches, this traveling in here is not 1-to-1. So with them dropping, super lifts basically 2 3/8 and brings it almost identical back to stock geometry. So it's not quite, it's just like the other parts of your lift. On, if you decide to put spacers on top of your struts, it's more of a 1-to-2 ratio and not a 1-to-1. People have that misconception that they put a 2-inch spacer on top and it thinks it gives them a 2-inch lift, and it more likely is going to give them about a 3 3 1/4 lift, 3.5. Maybe I'm just going to cover that maybe in another video. I'm getting a lot of stuff thrown in here together, but I just mainly wanted to show you guys the difference in the diff drops. Now, another big difference on their diff drop, they cut the front of the differential off and put a different mount, and I can't even show you what that is because I can't even get in to see mine right now. Mine's all enclosed in here, but they do that for another reason, which isn't a big deal. It's just they had to do it to run their cross member, so their cross member is in the way with their diff drop, so they cut the front of their diff off, which moves their mount back and out of the way of this. So I hope that explains some of that, and you guys understand that a little bit better on the design and how the diff drops are used. Okay, thanks guys again.